You're listening to the Valley Current.
I think when you think about kind of taking care of your health, I think you think about that first, and then you think about taking care of shelter. They kind of go together, like health and shelter and water and basic necessities of life. And when a fire happens, all of that just dramatically changes. I mean, it's a little bit like your life gets thrown upside down. I don't know if you start to think of contingency plans for yourself. Like a lot of people don't think of jumping on a plane and coming to Florida. I came to Florida for reasons of, the exigency of my brother. It happened to be good timing. And I said to Lee, who was staying back, my lovely wife, Dr. Lee Suter, she was staying back to attend to various things in California. I said, if it's smoky, jump on a plane and come out here. And of course, it's easy to jump on a plane. It may be risky, but it's easy to jump on a plane because the seats, the planes are like third full, half full. They're not full. And they give you a tremendous deal for a first class seat on points. So I've got like several 100,000 points from mileage that hasn't been used for a while. So what usually is 100,000 points to come to an East Coast location, whether it's, Miami or in Florida or New York City in New York, it's like 25,000 points now. They just want people to start traveling again. They want to get some sort of herd.
What airline?
American Airlines, Delta Airlines. I mean, almost every airline, every major airline is promoting amazing deals to get people to believe again that travel is a good thing, because most people don't think that way anymore. Most people think, hey, you got a business meeting? Let's do it by Zoom. Let's do it by phone. We're not traveling, we're sheltering in place. Now, when you have a situation where someone's dying, you take some risk, and I certainly put on all the masks and the face guard and the whole 9 yards. And I got a seat in a row by myself, so there was no one sneezing on me. But of course, the HVAC in the airliner itself is not necessarily the most amazing thing on earth. I think in the future they probably will give you an oxygen mask to actually put on during the flight itself, because that's probably the only way you'd really get clean air for what amounts to about a 6-hour flight, because you're breathing that recirculated air, which, they say they filter, but, how good can that be, right?
Well, I've heard it said, I don't know how true it is, that some of the airlines use what are called HEPA filters.
Yes.
And
that's the theory. Yes, the very high-end filters. But whether that's really going to work, I could tell you that many years ago, when I was a young single man, I dated a steward or stewardess. I guess they call them flight attendants, because stewardess is not viewed as correct. She was very old school, and she used to say, never drink the water out of the bathroom water. Never, never, never drink that water, because that water is so contaminated. And I said, why? And then she said, are you kidding me? That's all running through plumbing. And she would tell funny stories about, do you know what the main problem that brings airliners down is? Coca-Cola. Why? When people spill Coca-Cola, the rats get in the planes and they chew the wires. And the minute any rat poop is discovered in a plane, the plane has to be grounded, because the signal is some rat got into the plane, whether through cargo or through some other means, because there's, near airports, there are fields with mice and rats. And if they sniff the Coca-Cola sugar, they go for that Coca-Cola. And apparently once they're on the plane, they chew the wires like they're candy, particularly if the wires have had some spillage of Coca-Cola on them. So she said that one of the reasons airlines are moving towards no food and no drink other than water is statistically the planes are 10 times less likely to be grounded. And that was back, decades ago when I was dating her. So who knows what the rules are today. But I've noticed the planes now post C-19 are not serving food anymore. They're not serving, some of them don't even serve water. Some of them don't even serve black coffee. So it's kind of changed. It's become pretty much no frills. So getting a first class seat doesn't mean you're gonna have a great dinner, like you're going on some cruise or something, you know, the year ago view that you're going on a cruise. But what's your read of all this? Have we just overpopulated the planet, Len?
Do you get a meal at all in first class?
No. I mean, well, if you go probably first class, I took a very early flight, but maybe if you go on an afternoon flight, maybe they give you something. But early flights for sure. I mean, I'll find out on the way back, but I think they're avoiding it. I think they're cutting the cost to the bone, trying to get people back on. Now, of course, you might say that's counterintuitive. If you have a miserable flight, you may not have another flight again, right? Because, you know, it used to be if you got a first class ticket, it was unlimited food and unlimited drink. And I knew a lot of people that got first class tickets for their clients and said, oh, we're going to negotiate a contract. And they just kept the booze flowing because it was a little bit like having your own bartender in first class, right? Yeah. And a lot of stewardesses and stewards or flight attendants, they were fine with people getting drunk. They were like, you want to get drunk on us? Go ahead, go for it. So long as you can get off the plane, we're fine with it. Now I think they have some rules against that. But what do you think? Have we overpopulated the planet? Are we seeing kind of the end of the world here? Is this sort of a thing?
I think it is. Yes, it has been. And this is, of course, purely subjective, but there has been too many people on this planet for the past couple of years.
Right. I mean, we've kind of loaded the boat up so full. You know, I'm remembering those images of the boat people where they overload the ferry and the ferry capsizes between, like, you know, Greece and some other country. There's a ferry that runs, or in India, there's ferries that run that get so overloaded that people capsize the whole boat. I'm thinking we've done that to the planet. That's effectively what we've done to the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to me that we would do that to a planet, but you might say, well, that's what happens when you have too many people all on the boat at the same time, that boat will capsize.
But on dry land, we are generating trash and garbage. And I don't have to tell you that has been observed now in our oceans. In the north of the Pacific, there's a gyre that is enormous with floating garbage and plastic and bags and all kinds of garbage that gets dumped into the sea, mostly by the Asian countries that supply most of the trash because they are far less conscious of the environment than North America or even South America is.
Right. I think there's sort of a general view that, hey, we can load things as high as we want to load them, and somehow the boat will float. And it's almost like that same attitude plays out in how people think. And, you know, I mean, there's a story, I just pulled it up from 2019 of a Korean ferry, I think a South Korean ferry, in fact, that completely sank and killed, I don't know, 400 kids or hundreds of school children. South Korea promised to root out a culture that puts profit ahead of safety. I'll put that up on the screen just to give some context to the analogy that we're drawing here. But
yeah,
the analogy,
I remember that event.
Yeah, you remember. I mean, the analogy is you overload the boat so much, you are going to get people that will end up, you know, regretting the consequences of doing that. And that's, you know, that's kind of a real statement about how people can put profit to such a great degree that, you know, even with regulation, I'm sure there probably was some regulation, but it was fundamentally ignored, right? So this is the overloaded ferry flipped and drowned hundreds of school children. Could that happen again? This is a 2019 story, so about a year ago, and it's showing. I guess these are the two barges, and this is the ferry that went under. It's upside down, and they're searching for passengers. And this was a series done by the New York Times about how much rule breaking happens. And that's the sort of rescue team trying to get to the passengers that did make it alive. Some made it alive, and it says the name of the boat, called the Seawol, S-E-W-O-L, sank because of greed. You could argue the analogy is we're basically capsizing on this planet because there's just too many people. There's too many people on board. There's not enough regulation to prevent the catastrophe. And the result is going to be very similar. It's going to be a very similar result. These are all the kids, I guess, that died, school-age children, kids from South Korea that died on that ferry. I'm using it by analogy, or we're using it by analogy. I mean, these boats are pretty sturdy boats to begin with, but you can only put so many people on them before things go sideways. The planet is pretty sturdy as well. What are we looking at here when you look at how the world is changing? Because we've been focused on what's happening with coronavirus, but now we've got a whole nother catastrophe that you might say is even more urgent. Unless you say, no, they're both equally bad, or maybe one is worse than the other. I don't know how you would rank this. We got fires in California. We've got coronavirus still spreading, right?
Well, you missed the most important crisis.
Okay.
And that's the requirement to get rid of this deranged president that we have and his followers, because that involves not only the entire country, but the entire Western world, who is, and this country in particular, has been turned into having a major threat of this country ending as a democracy on November 10th or 15th, whenever the final count is made, if Trump and his mob of gangsters, and that's who most of them are, win. So,
I have to say the Florida people completely agree with Trump. I'm shocked. These guys on motorcycles, there's a lot of them. I could tell you a very funny story if you've got a minute, and it ties into your point. So on the way to visit, I'm staying at my mom's house. I'm taking care of her. Richie used to live here. Richie's now in hospice. On the way to get to his hospice, there's store after store that's a pawn shop. So I've been looking for an old bicycle because, of course, my brother never rode a bicycle. My mom hasn't been on a bicycle for probably 60, 70 years. And I said, Ma, don't you have a bicycle somewhere? I want to get some exercise. In fact, I want to ride the bicycle to the pool and then go both biking and swimming, which is what I've historically done in Northern California. She said, no, go to a pawn shop. They have bicycles for cheap. I go to a pawn shop and I asked the guy, what's the most major thing that's selling here in the pawn shop? I don't know if you visited pawn shops at all in your life, but this was one of my first trips to a Florida pawn shop. Not that I'm a regular of California pawn shops, I'm not. And he said, you know what sells the most here? Guns. Guns. People turn in their guns and they trade up, or they turn in their guns to get rent money, or they turn in their guns because they have too many guns. So I said, you can sell them? He said, yeah, you can sell them. I said, anyone can buy them? He said, anyone can buy them. He says, you got to be a resident of Florida and you got to have a little waiting period that's like 3 days. And he says, the second thing that sells the most, no waiting period at all, ammo for guns in pawn shops.
I lived in Florida for 2 years.
And I said, why are all the guns and ammo the biggest sellers? He said, well, that Biden guy, I'll just give you the way they say it, a little Southern drawl to it. That Biden guy, and I'm not being disrespectful, but they've got their own opinions and they've got their own sort of slang. That Biden guy, he's going to defund the police. Who's going to defend us if the police aren't around? He's going to defund. He's got that Kamala Harris. He's got that Kamala Harris. They're going to defund the police. And she used to be a prosecutor. and they're going to defund the police. I said, no, they're not going to defund the police. He said, no, they're going to defund the police. We got a Second Amendment right to have a gun. And they're all wearing, not concealed, they're all wearing sidearms. And they're like, we're going to vote for Trump because Trump won't defund the police. So he's got the base believing the police are history. The police are going to become like psychotherapists instead. Like there's going to be a whole new notion of how to care for people in the community. So he's got people here in Florida. I'm sure he's going to take Florida. You know, he moved to Florida as his primary residence. So I'm sure he's going to take Florida. So I'll just tell you a joke, because I punchline the joke. I went there to buy a bike. The guy was essentially showing me all the guns, trying to sell me a gun. I said, I'm not a resident of Florida yet, but maybe.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.